Today, we're going to talk about fundamentalist preaching and a contemporary fundamentalist preacher, Sean McDowell. Now, growing up, for me, a fundamentalist preacher was somebody who would preach like this: Today is the day of salvation. If you do not repent, you will be judged and wake up in hellfire, where you will rule forever in eternity. But today, Sean McDowell is much more affable. He is not fear based. He doesn't use that kind of dramatic voice inflection. But in the essence of his preaching, he is very much a fundamentalist in two key features. The first key feature of fundamentalist thinking is a very binary mindset that draws distinctions between in groups and out groups and thinks out groups can be dismissed. They're often foolish and ignorant. In groups are good, wise, true. And as a result, fundamentalism militates against a nuanced approach to reality in which you evaluate good and evil, right and wrong, some benefit of truth in all things. Fundamentalists tend to be black and white. They tend to toss things out if they don't fully agree with them. Another aspect of fundamentalism, along with that binary mindset and flowing out from it, in fact, is a tendency to be dismissive of and even condescending toward expert consensus opinion in various fields of discourse. Sean McDowell is going to evince or demonstrate both of these characteristics in this sermon on Galatians 1 6 to 9. He begins by introducing the text, and like a lot of preachers, he uses the text simply as a springboard to talk about the things he really wants to talk about. In this case, a long list of things he doesn't like, which he dubs false gospels. His centering point seems to be Galatians 1 8, where Paul says, Even if I or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel other than the one he has received, let him be accursed. And then McDowell says, I'm going to talk to you today about all of these different false gospels. What makes something a gospel for, for Sean McDowell? Well, he talks a lot about the concept of justification. And the way that he seems to view it is something becomes a false gospel if you are using that thing to justify yourself to other people. Uh, he doesn't explain what he means exactly here, but he will talk repeatedly about the idea that people are justifying themselves through these various commitments. The first thing he talks about is wokeism and how social justice concern is wokeism and is a false gospel. The next thing he's going to talk about now, and this is the clip that I'm going to play for us, is the environmental movement and how the environmental movement is a false gospel. So let's play the clip, and I'm going to warn you now that I'm not going to restrain myself from pausing and interjecting with sardonic critical commentary along the way. Again, McDowell is not a fire brimstone preacher. He's more like Rick Warren wearing his handsome Hawaiian shirt. But you will find the essence of fundamentalism in his approach to these issues: binary thinking and rejection of expert opinion.
The second false gospel without Jesus is the environmentalism gospel. You've heard the narrative. The polar bears are dying. California wildfires are running rampant from climate change. Whales are going extinct, and plastic straws are literally murdering turtles.
I feel like that should have a laugh track. The way that he's doing, it's like he's at the Laugh Factory doing a performance here. This is how he wants to characterize the environmental movement. The way that his mannerisms are conveying and his select examples are conveying that these are buffoons. They're worried about turtles dying from straws. Well, actually, Sean McDowell, you might be wise to be concerned about the problem of microplastics and single-use plastics in the environment. And if you cared about animal welfare, you would care about microplastics in marine life and, among other things, yes, even harming turtles or harming a cute little puppy like Daisy here. Mm. Okay, sorry, I've got to pick up Daisy because the rest of the family's out. So yeah, so what Sean McDowell conveys here is the environmental movement is foolish, right? They're worried about polar bears and they're worried about turtles being harmed. One thing I just want to say, um, look up, I think it's the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is like, I don't know, the size of California, something huge, and it's just all plastic and garbage and detritus floating in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, forming a massive island. Maybe not the size of California, maybe the size of Greater Los Angeles. I don't know. It's huge. Look up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and tell me if that's not a matter for concern. And for people who profess to be Christians and actually to believe that they have a creation mandate to be stewards of the earth and to care about animal welfare.
We've all heard this kind of alarmism, but it's nothing new. I found a quote from United Nations, and here's what they wrote. They said, "We have a 10-year window of opportunity to solve the greenhouse effects before it goes beyond human control." Now, I'm not a math teacher, but this was stated by the United Nations in 1989.
All right. So again, he's doing his whole shtick here. I'm not a math teacher. I'm just a country lawyer. And then what he does is he cherry picks a quote from 1989 in order to give the impression to his 2025 audience that the consensus of experts on human induced climate change don't know what they're talking about. Uh, they're essentially, he's implying they're fools who can be dismissed, and their cautions can be dismissed because look at what these fools predicted in 1989 that didn't come true. Well, I would love to begin to give you some predictions of what Christians were predicting in 1989, and maybe we can use that as a basis to dismiss Christianity. It's incredibly irresponsible. And this is that classic fundamentalist mindset that you can dismiss experts in climatology, in meteorology, in earth sciences, because you've got some cherry picked quote. And oh, aren't they a bunch of stupid people? And aren't we fundamentalist dispensational Christians in our Southern California church smart?
I'm pretty sure that's more than 10 years ago. According to Michael Schellenberger, who's not a conservative Christian, I don't think economically or culturally, he said apocalyptic environmentalism has replaced traditional religion in the West. He said environmentalists look to scientists to interpret nature. We practice recycling instead of communion as a spiritual discipline.
I'm going to pause there again. Oh, Sean McDowell found some rando quote that he liked from a person that, why should I care about this person's opinion? I mean, it's incredible to me. McDowell just dismissed the consensus of scientific experts on human induced climate change, but he thinks for some reason I should take seriously some rando's quote that he has chosen to use as a justification to smear environmental concern. It's just a bizarre valuation. Reject all the scientific experts, but here's a quote about environmental apocalypticism, which is religious, according to this guy. Why should I listen to this guy? Why does McDowell decide this? And then he says, this guy says, "Oh, we practice recycling as a religious rite or a sacrament." You know what? It's just a matter of giving a crap about the environment. Here, I'm going to have to say something. So, for years, we visited family in Fort Collins and Aurora, Colorado. And through the last 20 years, 25 years, I guess, 25 years that I've been driving down there, they've never recycled anything. It's not the fault of the people we're visiting. It's that there are no recycling programs in place. And so all the plastic, all the cardboard, all the glass just goes in the trash. Well, in Edmonton, Canada, where I live, is far from perfect. But we've long had recycling programs in place for, I'm sure, the whole time I've lived here. And my wife grew up in Korea, South Korea, of course. And back in the 1980s in South Korea, they were already had recycling programs where you would single out different plastics and you'd have to separate your one, two, three, four, five plastics for recycling. And it was just part of life. And the actual garbage that would go into the landfill was like for a family of four was like this much because everything was being recycled and composted. And that's 45 years ago. And in 2025, McDowell is making these snotty comments about recycling. It's it's just so infuriating to me. The thought that you can dismiss your moral obligation to reduce your carbon footprint upon the earth. Every person, you have a moral obligation to be concerned about the externalities that you're downloading onto the environment. In economics, an externality is a cost that you do not pay. You can download it onto the environment or onto somebody else. So when you are idling your vehicle and have clouds, billows of carbon monoxide going into the environment, that is an externality from the use of your vehicle. You don't have to bear the cost of that carbon monoxide. The environment has to absorb it. And time and again, we live expelling externalities into the earth, and they have a disproportionate impact upon the most vulnerable people on the planet, such as people in Bangladesh, where large tracts of land over the next decades are going to be inundated by rising sea levels and more powerful storms. Yes, that should be a concern to you. Yes, you should be concerned with recycling.
There's prophets like Greta Thunberg, and there's a yearning for a heavenly day when we're at peace with nature.
Okay, yeah, it. Okay, first of all, Greta Thunberg, you can call her a prophet. I'm so tired of fundamentalists and evangelicals dumping on Greta Thunberg. Yeah, I don't know, maybe she can be a little bit obnoxious sometimes. When she was 18, she was like trying to save the planet. When I was 18, I was smashing beer bottles on the railroad tracks. So I'm not going to complain about Greta Thunberg being a prophet. I wish there were more prophets like that. And then he talks about, oh, they want to have they have their own eschatology because they want to save the earth. Well, I don't see anything particularly wrong with that. I wish dispensationalists that think you can just toss the earth into a trash can had a little bit of that eschatology as well.
He said it functions like a religion, now to add as a means of justification. So there's many people today who think we've sinned against Mother Nature, and so they recycle, give funds to save the environment, vote for environmental friendly policies, and proclaim the gospel of environmentalism. Now, of course, we should care for the environment. That's a biblical command.
You know what? I'm sorry, buddy. You just spent 2 minutes dumping on environmental concern, mocking environmentalists, implicitly rejecting, dismissing the consensus of scientific experts on matters such as human induced climate change. And now you're going to play the, but of course we should care about the environment card. I don't buy it. You have just conveyed to people they don't have to care about the environment. You've conveyed to them they can dismiss concern for microplastics in the environment, for the impact on sea life and turtles, for the need to recycle. So be a little bit more consistent, Sean McDowell, please.
But when doing so becomes a means of justification before God and others, it's a false gospel.
So we can conclude with that. So he says, yeah, environmentalism is great, but the second you try to justify yourself with it, it's a false gospel. That is the binary thinking right there. Rather than say, you know what, if you are concerned with animal welfare, if you are concerned with the impact of rising sea levels on vulnerable human populations, if you're concerned with industrial agriculture and its impact on animal well-being and on the environment, if you're concerned with the disproportionate carbon footprint of eating meat, if you're concerned with human-induced climate change, all of these things, then we should be allies because any self respecting Christian who has a half decent theology of creation, creation stewardship, and a proper eschatology should indeed be concerned about these things. And the environmentalists who live out that environmental concern are participating in the kingdom of God to that degree. So the fact that you say they're justifying themselves that doesn't make what they're doing a false gospel, and it doesn't warrant you dismissing them as fools, let alone dismissing the consensus of experts on human-induced climate change. So that is an excerpt from this 37-minute sermon, and there are nuggets of truth interspersed with a whole lot of coal in this sermon, and it's the coal ultimately that shows Sean McDowell is a fundamentalist preacher for 2025.